All right, welcome back to America Talks Live. Joining me now is Dr. Jasser. He is a retired lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy. He is also president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and he is the author of the book, Battle for the Soul of Islam, An American Muslim's Patriot Fight to Save His Faith. Zudi, always good to have you with us. Thanks for being here. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always great to be with you, Bill. Thank you.
Well, this is really great because we are on the eve of somewhat a fairly momentous trip by President Donald Trump. He will be traveling to 5 countries over the next 9 days. It'll be his first foreign visit, his first foreign trip as president. It'll be interesting because he's encompassing the three of the world's chief religions. He's going to the Vatican while in Rome to speak with Pope Francis. He is going to be in Israel to speak there, and he's also going to be in Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a very interesting trip. What do you want to see him do specifically in the Middle East, whereas with Saudi Arabia and Israel?
Well, I think, first of all, he got some criticism that he's starting out with Saudi Arabia when he didn't even go to Canada or Europe. I think it's the right place to start because he campaigned on national security. He campaigned on stopping ISIS. And the best place to start that is in the belly of the beast in Saudi Arabia. And also, he's making up for a lot of lost time. We had 8 years of an Obama administration that had a disease of Iranophilia, where it was doing appeasement with the Khomeinis, Hezbollah, Assad, and others on the Shia side, and ultimately abandoned the long-time 50-year history of Western alliances with the Sunni regimes, if you will. But at least we had stability there from a kinetic perspective. So he needs to fix that, reboot that, or reset it, if you will. But what I'd like to hear him say is go beyond and let us hear not only what the Trump doctrine is against, but what is the Trump doctrine for? Will he talk about universal human rights? Will he call Islamist extremism in Riyadh, where the Wahhabis of Saudi Arabia have fueled the ideas of misogyny, anti-Semitism, and Caliphism that is creating the ISISes of the world, and tell them to their face, as he has been a disruptor and an anti-establishment campaigner, if you will. Hopefully he'll fight the Islamic establishment and tell them, we're going to work in the short term against ISIS, but long term, you guys have to lead some deep reforms.
Well, I suspect there are a lot of people who would be really happy to see the campaign Trump manifest itself on this foreign visit. But in a lot of different ways, the campaign Trump has turned into a milder Trump in some ways, specifically in the Middle East. What do you think the odds are? I'm putting them fairly low that he calls out radical Islam, that he calls out Sharia, that he calls out the things that he railed against, which the American public responded so positively to here on the campaign.
I fear that you're right. And the reason is part of my concern during the campaign was he was wonderfully anti-establishment domestically, but he really wasn't so when it came to calling out dictators like Gaddafi and Saddam and others. And I'm afraid that we're going to sort of slide into the same sort of sense that stability is somehow helped by continuing these dictatorships, when in fact are real allies. He's going to have a Twitter forum in which General McMaster said that they're going to talk and have President Trump, who's been so successful on Twitter medium, talk to the Saudis about how to use that. Well, he's going to need to do that talking to the prisoners that are in jail for blasphemy, apostasy. Those are the folks on Twitter that we should be talking to as our allies, not the regime that is problematic. So you're right. It might be a bridge too far, but I'm going to hold him, and I hope others do, accountable to the values that are American and have been his values too.
Well, it would in fact be outstanding. I mean, we know when he goes to Israel, he is going to speak, but he is not going to be pushing for Jerusalem to be the home of the U.S. Embassy there. He seems to be backing down on a couple of other promises that he made toward Israel. Is that because he thinks that somehow this is going to net him some progress in terms of trying to create stability in the Middle East? And is it a good idea? Is it the right thing to do?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple things at play here. One is he's quickly beginning to learn that the complicated world of diplomacy and the Middle East, in which you've had the only democracy, which is our ally, have 8 years now of abandonment from the Obama administration. Now we have to rekindle those relationships and reinforce them, that we will stand with Israel regardless of who its enemies are. And at the end of the day, I think he's also sort of have this affinity, which most presidents, I don't know where they get it from, that somehow the golden egg, if you will, is this Israeli-Palestinian peace, and that's what they want to solve. And I hope the reformers, those who look forward for a doctrine of liberty and freedom in the Middle East, will say, you know what, stop the linkage. Solving that peace problem will not solve the radical Islamic problem. It is a false connection, and they make that link in order to legitimize Hamas, legitimize Abbas, and others, in which they actually do need an Arab awakening within the Palestinian community, and you don't fuel that by legitimizing the old tribal leaders of the 20th century. And I think he'll learn that. So the third part of the problem for President Trump has been sort of needing to do a quick study on a history in the region, politics in the region, that really he didn't have before the presidency.
Yeah, and that's a whole super advanced postgraduate course, if you will. That is a swamp of a different sort, if I may say so. ISIS has released a new video featuring a purportedly American fighter calling for attacks in the U.S. Footage of new weapons that the terrorists have built. Those include drones, rovers, all kinds of things. They're using the handle Abu Hamza al-Amiraki. I hope I got that right. The bearded man appears with his face uncovered, urges lone wolf attacks. It looks like they may be bringing the fight to the United States in a new, aggressive, urgent way. Does this new video concern you, or do you think it's more of the same from ISIS?
Well, it's all of the above. And let me tell you what we're missing. Everyone wants to sort of blame President Trump and the political cycle and whatever inflammatory issue they want to raise. The bottom line is we Muslims are only a week plus away from Ramadan. And it's a time of reflection. It's a time of spirituality and fasting. But if you look at the jihadists, it's the time in which they commit the most acts of war, in which they feel that if they die in this battle of theirs, this cataclysmic battle, it will achieve them 30, 100 times more ascension to heaven. So we always have a higher risk profile. You look in the last few years, there's always been more attacks in Ramadan. It commences May 26th. So Abu Hamza al-Amriki is trying to mobilize any of the assets that are jihadists, that are ideologically bound to ISIS. I hope we don't use the term lone wolf. These are all packs of the same global jihadists of ISIS, and they're starting to see a president that is drawing red lines that he means, and they're seeing some pressure like they've never seen before in Raqqa and elsewhere. So be ready for more attacks, unfortunately.
I have to ask this question, and it may be an ignorant question, because I'm ignorant. Why is it, Zudi, that greater importance is attached by the jihadists to violent acts that are committed during the period of Ramadan? It seems antithetical to me.
It's certainly antithetical to every honest spiritual Muslim I know. It's a time no different than Yom Kippur or other spiritual holidays of self-atonement, of self-reflection and atonement with God, of humility. But you'll see also it's a time of intense rapture, if you will, with God and the scripture, etc. So if they have a narrative about Islam that's dominant and supremacist, that Sharia will dominate, and they want to bring back what they feel was what the Prophet had, there's no time in which those emotions are higher than in Ramadan. And in Islamic history, there were some wars that were fought during Ramadan, and there are some sayings of the Prophet that do highlight the fact that not only do they not have to fast then, but the legitimacy of their act is higher in this spiritual time. So unfortunately, we have some reform work to do in that regard.
That is amazing. Well, you are working hard at doing just that sort of reform work, and we thank you for that, and we thank you for being here. Dr. Zudi Jasser, thanks so much. Remember to keep it here with NewsMax TV, and remember that you can always stay connected at newsmax.com. And if you're on Facebook, you can go over and like our page on Facebook and stay connected with us there and on social media as well.